In the rain-soaked alleys of Palermo, a mute girl appeared bloodied, barefoot, trembling. No one dared to ask what happened until he found her. Lorenzo Moretti, the ruthless Sicilian crime lord known for silence and violence, knelt before her and whispered, "Who hurt you?" She couldn't answer, but her eyes told him everything. From that night, the city burned. Enemies vanished, secrets surfaced, and the man feared by all began a war for the only thing pure in his dark world, her stolen voice. The rain fell like bullets on Palermo's ancient cobblestones, cold and relentless. Elena Russo stumbled through the narrow alley behind Via Roma, her white dress torn and stained crimson. Her bare feet slapped against wet stone as she ran from shadows that seemed to chase her from every direction. Blood trickled from a gash above her eyebrow, mixing with rain and tears she could no longer feel. She had no voice to scream. That had been taken from her months ago. Lorenzo Moretti sat in the back room of Ristorante Nero, his private domain where business was conducted in whispers and sealed with blood. The restaurant's warm amber light barely reached the corners where his men stood guard. He was reviewing territorial reports when his lieutenant, Dante Salvatore, burst through the door. "Boss, there's someone outside. A girl she collapsed by your car." Lorenzo's expression didn't change. He'd seen desperation before. "Call an ambulance." She grabbed the door handle. "Won't let go. She's looking right at the window. At you." Something in Dante's voice made Lorenzo stand. He moved through the restaurant, past tables where diners pretended not to notice him, past the kitchen where his money was laundered through legitimate receipts. Outside, rain hammered the awning. She knelt beside his black Mercedes, one hand clutching the door handle, the other pressed against her throat. Her eyes, dark green, almost gray in the streetlight, found his immediately. They were wild with terror but sharp with intelligence. She wasn't begging. She was demanding his attention. Lorenzo had killed men for less audacity. He knelt, ignoring the rain soaking through his suit. Up close, he could see the bruises forming on her collarbone, the way her jaw was swollen on one side. Defensive wounds marked her forearms. She'd fought back. "Who hurt you?" he asked quietly. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out except a small, broken sound, like glass cracking. Her hand went to her throat again, fingers pressing against her larynx as if trying to force words through damaged vocal cords. Lorenzo had seen many kinds of pain. This was different. This was violation. "Dante, bring the car around back. We're taking her to Dr. Marcello." He stood, then paused. "And find out if anyone reported a missing girl in the last 24 hours. Rich family. Northern Italy, probably. How do you—" Her dress. "Look at the fabric. That's not something you buy in Palermo." Lorenzo lifted her carefully. She didn't resist, but her body was rigid with fear. As he carried her to the back entrance, she made another sound, this one softer, questioning. "You're safe now," he said, knowing it was a lie he couldn't yet keep. In his world, safety was never guaranteed. But for reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to make it true for her. Elena woke in a room that smelled of lavender and antiseptic. Late afternoon sun filtered through heavy curtains, casting everything in amber. Her body ached, but the sharp edges of pain had been dulled. She sat up slowly, registering the IV in her arm, the fresh bandages on her hands and feet. The door opened. An older man with silver hair and kind eyes entered, carrying a medical bag. "Good, you're awake. I'm Dr. Marcello." He spoke calmly, as if finding traumatized patients in Lorenzo Moretti's villa was routine. "Perhaps it was. You're safe here. No one will hurt you." Elena's hand went automatically to her throat. She tried to speak, habit died hard, but only that same broken sound emerged. Dr. Marcello sat in the chair beside her bed. "May I examine your throat?" She nodded. His fingers were gentle, professional. When he finished, his expression was grave. "Physical trauma to the vocal cords. Recent, but not from the injuries you sustained last night. This is older, perhaps 3-4 months. The damage was severe but not irreversible. With proper therapy, you might speak again." "Might." The word hung in the air like smoke. "Do you remember what happened?" Elena's hands trembled. She looked around frantically for something to write with. The doctor handed her a notepad and pen. Her handwriting was shaky. "They'll find me." "Who?" She wrote 3 words. "The Rossi family." Dr. Marcello's face darkened. "I see. Stay here. I need to speak with Lorenzo." Alone, Elena studied the room. High ceilings, antique furniture, Original artwork on the walls. This wasn't a safe house, this was someone's private sanctuary. She slipped out of bed, legs unsteady, and moved to the window. The villa overlooked the sea. In the garden below, Lorenzo stood with another man, both wearing dark suits despite the heat. They spoke in low voices, but even from this distance, Elena could read Lorenzo's body language-controlled violence barely contained. He looked up suddenly, directly at her window. Their eyes met across the distance. He said something to the other man and headed toward the villa. Elena backed away from the window, heart racing. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he'd helped her. In her experience, men who had power wanted something in return. Lorenzo entered without knocking. He carried a leather notebook and an expensive pen. "Sit," he said. Not unkind, but absolute. Saturday. He placed the notebook on the bed between them. "Dr. Marcello told me you wrote a name, Rossi." "Which Rossi?" "There are 6 families in northern Italy with that name." Elena picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over paper. If she wrote this name, people would die. She'd seen enough of Lorenzo's world in the past 12 hours to know that violence was his first language. But she was tired of being afraid. She wrote, "Matteo Rossi, Florence. His father is Senator Giuseppe Rossi." Lorenzo read it. His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Tell me everything." Elena wrote for an hour. Her hand cramped, but she didn't stop. Lorenzo sat across from her, reading each page as she filled it. 6 months ago, she'd been hired as a domestic worker for Senator Rossi's Florence estate. She was 19, putting herself through university. The pay was good. The family seemed respectable. Matteo Rossi was 28, handsome, educated at Oxford. He collected art and hosted charity galas. In public, he was perfect. In private, he and 3 of his friends, Luca Ferretti, Antonio Bellini, and Marco Conti, had different tastes. The first time, they'd been drinking after a party. Matteo had followed her to the service quarters, cornered her in the laundry room. When she'd fought back, he'd grabbed her throat and squeezed until darkness crept into her vision. "Scream and I'll kill your mother," he'd whispered. "I know where she lives in Naples." For 3 months, it continued. They were careful, never leaving marks that showed in uniform. Elena reported it to the estate manager, who laughed. She went to local police, who took her statement and did nothing. Senator Rossi had connections everywhere. The night she escaped, Matteo had been hosting a private party. One of his friends suggested they break her completely. They dragged her to the wine cellar. When Matteo wrapped his hands around her throat that time, he didn't stop. She'd clawed at his face, felt his blood under her nails, heard Luca laughing as her vision went dark. She woke up in a storage room, alone. Her throat was destroyed. She couldn't scream, couldn't speak. They'd left her there to be found by morning staff, a warning to stay silent. Elena stole a car key from the estate security office and drove. She didn't know where, just away. She ran out of gas outside Palermo, abandoned the car, and walked until her feet bled. When she finished writing, Lorenzo set down the last page. His hands were steady, but Elena noticed the white knuckles, the tension in his jaw. "Their names," he said quietly. "Write them again, all 4. She did. Lorenzo stood, folded the paper, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "You'll stay here. Dante will be outside your door. No one enters except Dr. Marcello and myself." Elena grabbed his wrist. She couldn't explain why, maybe because he was the first person who'd believed her, or maybe because she recognized something in his eyes, the same rage she'd swallowed for months. She wrote quickly, "Don't kill them." Lorenzo read it. For the first time, something almost resembling a smile touched his mouth. "I won't kill them," he said. Then he left. What Elena didn't understand yet was that Lorenzo Moretti kept his promises literally. He wouldn't kill them, but he'd never promised they'd survive. 3 days passed. Elena healed slowly, her body recovering faster than her mind. She spent hours watching the sea from her window, sometimes writing in the notebook Lorenzo had given her. Other times, she tried to make sounds, any sounds, pressing her hand against her throat and feeling the damaged tissue beneath. Dr. Marcello came daily. "The swelling is decreasing. In a few weeks, we can try vocal therapy." But it was Lorenzo's visits she anticipated most, though she couldn't explain why. He came every evening after dark, still wearing the blood and business of his day, never speaking much. Sometimes he brought food, fresh fruit, pastries from a bakery in the old city. Once, he brought a sketchbook and charcoal pencils. I saw you drawing on the notebook pages, he explained. Thought you might want better materials. Elena had stared at the gift, unused to kindness without strings attached. That night, she sketched the view from her window. Lorenzo sat in the armchair across from her bed, reading through papers, occasionally making phone calls in rapid dialect she couldn't fully follow. She was shading the cypress trees when his phone rang again. This time, his voice changed colder, sharper. Show me. He pulled up something on his phone, studied it. His expression remained neutral, but Elena had learned to read the small signs, the muscle twitching in his jaw, the way his free hand formed a fist. Good. Keep them there. I'll come tomorrow. He ended the call and met her questioning gaze. We found them. All four. Elena's charcoal pencil stopped mid-stroke. She reached for her notebook. Where? Rome. Matteo was at his apartment. The others were easier to locate, they don't have senatorial protection. He paused. Do you want to see them? Her hand trembled as she wrote. No. Then, after a moment, yes. Which is it? She underlined the second word 3 times. Lorenzo nodded. Tomorrow, then. I'll have appropriate clothes brought for you. Something warm, the warehouse district gets cold at night. He stood to leave, but Elena grabbed his hand. This time, she didn't let go immediately. Instead, she guided his hand to the page where she'd been sketching, pressing his palm against the unfinished drawing. When she released him, a smudged handprint remained on the paper, half of his palm dark with charcoal, mixing with her lighter fingerprints. Lorenzo looked at the image. I don't understand. Elena wrote beneath the handprint. Neither of us has clean hands now. I chose this too. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe, or respect. Yes, he said quietly. You did. After he left, Elena continued drawing. But instead of the seascape, she sketched his face from memory. The sharp angles, the old scars at his temple, the eyes that had seen too much death to fear it. She titled the sketch, The Man Who Asked. The warehouse stood in Palermo's industrial district, anonymous among dozens of identical structures. Lorenzo's Mercedes parked in the loading bay. Dante killed the engine. Are you certain? Lorenzo asked Elena. Once you go inside, you can't unsee this. Elena was dressed in black clothes that had been purchased specifically for this occasion, tailored to fit her. She nodded firmly and wrote, I need to see their faces when they're afraid. Lorenzo understood. He'd had that same need once, years ago, when men had taken someone he loved. Inside, the warehouse was mostly empty except for a cleared space in the center. 3 men hung from chains attached to the ceiling support beams: Luca Ferretti, Antonio Bellini, and Marco Conti. Their faces were bruised, but they were conscious, alive. Matteo Rossi stood separately, his hands bound in front of him but not suspended. He still had his pride, his expensive clothes only slightly rumpled. When he saw Elena, recognition flashed across his face, followed by fury. You little. Lorenzo moved so fast Elena almost missed it. His fist connected with Matteo's jaw, sending him to the concrete floor. The lady can't speak, Lorenzo said calmly. So you'll stay quiet until she needs something from you. Matteo spat blood. Do you know who my father is? Senator Giuseppe Rossi. Net worth approximately 40 million euros. 4 properties in Italy, 2 in Switzerland. 1 son you. Lorenzo lit a cigarette. I know everything about your family. Then you know he'll destroy you for this. Perhaps. But first, you're going to apologize. Matteo laughed, actually laughed. You're insane. Lorenzo gestured to Dante, who pulled out a tablet. This is your father's offshore account, the one he doesn't report to the tax authorities. I've had my people monitoring it for 3 days. With one call, everything in it gets transferred to a charity for domestic violence survivors. Matteo's face went white. That's 20 million euros. Yes, and I'll donate another 20 from my own accounts in your name. That's 40 million to help women you and your friends have probably hurt. Lorenzo took a long drag. Or, you can apologize to Elena. Really apologize, and I'll let you keep the money. I'm not. Transfer it, Lorenzo told Dante. Wait. Matteo struggled to his knees. Wait. I'll apologize. Lorenzo looked at Elena. She stood motionless, arms wrapped around herself. She wrote, Make them say what they did, all of it. Lorenzo, read it. You heard her. Matteo's face twisted. You can't make me. I'm not making you do anything. But for every hour you refuse, I donate another 1 million. Your father will notice eventually. How do you think he'll react when he discovers his son is the reason the family fortune disappeared? The psychological torture was elegant. Elena watched Matteo break in real time, not from physical pain, but from the destruction of his protection, his privilege. Finally he spoke, and Elena listened to every word. Matteo's confession took an hour. He spoke slowly, bitterly, detailing every assault, every threat. The other three corroborated, their own fear making them eager to comply. Elena stood through all of it. Lorenzo had offered her a chair, but she'd refused. She needed to stand for this to look down at them while they finally told the truth. When Matteo finished, his voice was hoarse. There, happy? Lorenzo stubbed out his cigarette. I told you I wouldn't kill you, and I won't, but I never promised you'd survive. Confusion flickered across Matteo's face. Senator Rossi has enemies, Lorenzo continued. Many enemies. Politicians he's crossed, business rivals, families of people hurt by his policies. I've compiled a comprehensive file of everything you just confessed, along with evidence of your father's financial crimes. By morning, it will reach 3 journalists, 2 prosecutors, and a federal judge who owes me nothing. That'll ruin him, Matteo whispered. It'll ruin all of us. Yes. Your father will lose everything, his position, his money, his reputation. And you? Lorenzo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You'll spend the next 20 years in prison. Italian prisons are harsh for men like you. I'm sure you'll make many new friends. Elena wrote and showed Lorenzo the page. What about them? She gestured to the 3 hanging men. They'll receive the same treatment. I've documented everything. Assault charges for all of them, backed by your testimony and physical evidence Dr. Marcello collected. He turned back to Matteo. You see, I kept my promise. I'm not killing you. The system will destroy you instead. Slower, more painful. Matteo lunged at him. Dante intercepted easily, driving him back to the ground. Lorenzo ignored the outburst. Dante, call the authorities. Anonymous tip about a break-in at this warehouse. Include the location of certain documents. As they walked back to the car, Elena's hands were shaking. Not from fear, from release. The weight she'd carried for months was finally lifting. In the car, Lorenzo handed her a bottle of water. She drank, then wrote, "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The legal process will be long. You'll need to testify. I can't speak. Written testimony is admissible. And by the time the trial starts, perhaps you will speak." He glanced at her. Dr. Marcello is optimistic. Elena looked out at Palermo's lights, trying to process everything. In one night, Lorenzo had dismantled the lives of 4 men without spilling their blood. It was elegant, brutal, and perfectly calculated. She wrote, "Why did you help me?" Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. "I had a sister once, younger than you. Men like Matteo hurt her. I was too late to save her." Elena's breath caught. "So I saved you instead," he said simply. And Elena understood. She wasn't just a victim he'd rescued. She was his second chance. Recovery was slow. Dr. Marcello came 3 times a week for vocal therapy. Elena would sit in the villa's garden, trying to make sounds while he guided her through exercises. Breathe deeply. Now, try to hum. Don't force it. A small sound emerged, barely more than a vibration. Good, that's good. The vocal cords are healing. Between therapy sessions, Elena sketched. The garden, the sea, Dante standing guard. And repeatedly, Lorenzo, always from memory, capturing the moments she'd observed him, reading documents, speaking on the phone, staring out at the water. He noticed the sketches one evening. "You're talented," she wrote. "I wanted to study art. Before. Why can't you still?" "Because I'm dead." Legally. Lorenzo sat beside her on the garden bench. "Explain." She wrote quickly. "I'm Elena Russo. I should have died in that Florence estate. If I resurface, they'll find me not just Matteo but others. People he told. People who want silence. Then we'll make you someone else." Elena looked at him sharply. "New identity. New papers. Complete background. I have resources." He paused. "You could start over. Study art in Rome, Paris, anywhere. The person you were died. The person you'll become can be anything." The offer was so large, Elena couldn't process it. "Freedom. Real freedom." She wrote, "Why? What do you want from me?" Lorenzo met her eyes. "I want you to stay." The garden seemed very quiet. "Not as a prisoner. he continued. Not as someone who owes me, but as someone who chooses to be here. Elena's hand trembled as she wrote, I don't understand. Neither do I, Lorenzo admitted. I've built my life on certainty, knowing exactly what I want and taking it. But with you, I don't want to take anything. I want you to give it. Elena studied his face. In the fading light, he looked younger, less certain, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, she placed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady, strong. Lorenzo covered her hand with his. I know what I am, what I do. I'm not asking you to forgive that or ignore it. I'm asking if you can live with it. Elena withdrew her hand and wrote, You asked who hurt me. You're the first person who asked. Not what happened, who. Like I was human enough to name them. She showed him the paper. You are human. More than anyone I know. Elena leaned forward and kissed him soft, brief, testing. When she pulled back, Lorenzo's expression was carefully neutral, but his hand had come up to cup her face. Stay, he whispered. She couldn't speak the word, but she nodded. And for the first time in 6 months, Elena felt like she might have a future. Peace lasted 3 weeks. Elena had begun venturing into Palermo with Lorenzo. First just drives through the city, then walks through markets, eventually dinners at quiet restaurants where Lorenzo's presence meant privacy. She was learning sign language. Lorenzo was learning it too, buying books and practicing late at night. Their conversations became fluid, less dependent on written words, more on gesture and expression. But Lorenzo had enemies. Men who'd lost territory, lost profits, lost face. And he had family. Marco Salvatore, Lorenzo's cousin and second in command, had been watching. Marco was ambitious, hungry for power, and frustrated by Lorenzo's recent distraction. You're getting soft, Marco said one night after a meeting. You spend more time with that girl than managing business. Lorenzo's voice was cold. Be very careful. The men are talking. They say you've changed, that you're weak. The men follow me because I'm effective. My personal life doesn't concern them. It does when it affects decisions. You turned down the Milan contract because you didn't want to be away for 2 weeks. That was 50 million euros. Lorenzo stood slowly. I turned it down because the risk assessment was poor. You're confusing strategy with weakness. Marco's jaw tightened. Maybe. Or maybe you've forgotten what we are. We're not heroes. We're not saviors. We take what we want, and we survive. Get out. Marco left, but his resentment lingered like smoke. 2 days later, Elena was in the garden when Dante found her. His face was pale. We need to go inside. Now. She signed the question, but Dante was already guiding her toward the villa. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Lorenzo's men moved with purpose, checking weapons, making calls. Something had shifted. Lorenzo found her in the library. Pack essentials. You're leaving Palermo tonight. Elena signed. What happened? Marco's made a move. He's aligned with the Ferretti family, Luca's relatives. They want revenge for what happened to him, and they want my territory. I'm not leaving you. This isn't negotiable. Yes, it is. She signed sharply. I'm not running again. I'm tired of running. Lorenzo grabbed her shoulders. They'll use you against me. Don't you understand? You're my weakness. Then we're both weak. An explosion shattered the moment close. Maybe the front gate. Gunfire followed immediately. Lorenzo pushed Elena behind him, drawing his weapon. Dante, get her to the safe room. But Dante was already down, blood spreading from his shoulder. Marco stepped through the doorway, his own gun drawn. Sorry, cousin. Nothing personal. Marco. She dies first, then you. Clean succession. Elena saw Lorenzo's hand tighten on his weapon, saw the calculation in his eyes. He couldn't draw fast enough to save them both. So she made a choice. She stepped in front of Lorenzo and opened her mouth. The sound that emerged was broken, rough, barely recognizable as a word. Please. It was the first word she'd spoken in 6 months. And it changed everything. Marco froze. She can speak? The distraction lasted 1 second. Lorenzo used it. His shot took Marco in the shoulder, sending him sprawling. More gunfire erupted from outside Lorenzo's men responding to the assault. The safe room, Lorenzo commanded, pulling Elena away from Marco's fallen form. Now. They ran through corridors Elena barely recognized, Lorenzo covering their retreat. Behind them, the villa erupted into chaos, shouts, gunshots, breaking glass. The safe room was in the basement, behind a wine rack that swung outward on hidden hinges. Lorenzo pushed Elena inside. "Lock it after me. Don't open for anyone but me or Dr. Marcello." "You're leaving?" She signed frantically. "I'm ending this." He pressed his gun into her hands. "If anyone else gets through that door, shoot them." "Don't." Her voice cracked on the word, painful and raw. "Don't go." Lorenzo kissed her hard. "I'll come back. I promise." Then he was gone, the wine rack sliding shut. Elena stood alone in the reinforced room, listening to the war above her. Every gunshot made her flinch. Every shout could be Lorenzo's death. She couldn't just wait. Looking around, she found the security monitors. Multiple screens showed different areas of the villa. The main entrance was overrun at least a dozen armed men. Marco's coup was well planned, but Lorenzo was a survivor. On one screen, she watched him move through the villa like a predator, efficient, lethal, calculating. 2 men down. 3. He was fighting his way back toward the main security office. Then she saw it. Marco, recovered from his shoulder wound, flanking Lorenzo from a blind angle. Elena's hands moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed the safe room's emergency phone direct line to Lorenzo's men. "East wing," she forced out, voice breaking. "Marco, behind." The response was immediate. One of Lorenzo's men intercepted, diving between Marco and Lorenzo. Gunfire. Both men fell. Lorenzo spun, saw Marco, and fired. Marco dropped. The battle lasted another 10 minutes. When silence finally fell, it was absolute. Elena waited, counting her heartbeats. 5 minutes. 10. The wine rack moved. Lorenzo stood in the opening, covered in blood, some his, most not. His left arm hung awkwardly, injured. "It's done," he said. Elena flew at him, careful of his injured arm, pressing her face against his chest. He was alive, solid, real. "You saved me," Lorenzo murmured into her hair. "On the phone. That was you." She nodded. "Your voice. You spoke." Elena pulled back, meeting his eyes. She opened her mouth, fighting through the pain. "You." Came back. 3 words. They cost her everything. Her throat felt like fire. But Lorenzo was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she'd known him. "I promised," he said. And Elena understood. They'd saved each other. Not just tonight, but from the moment he'd asked, "Who hurt you?" From the moment she'd decided to answer. 6 months later, Palermo was different. Or maybe Elena was different. She stood behind the counter of Cafe Silencio, the small cafe Lorenzo had purchased near the harbor. The name had been her idea, a joke about her voice that had become something meaningful. The cafe served more than coffee. It was a front. Yes, Lorenzo was still Lorenzo, still involved in the underworld, but it was also real. A place where people came for refuge, for quiet conversation, for safety. Elena had become its heart. Her voice was still imperfect. Some days she could speak clearly. Other days only whispers emerged. But she'd learned that silence had its own power. She communicated with regulars through sign language, written notes, and the universal language of carefully prepared espresso. The cafe had become known as a place where questions weren't asked, where bruises weren't judged, where a woman could sit with coffee and know she was safe. Lorenzo entered as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. He moved differently now, still dangerous, but less haunted. He'd restructured his organization after Marco's betrayal, cutting out the violence that served ego rather than purpose. "Busy day?" he asked. Elena signed. 3 new faces. One I'm worried about. She gestured to a young woman in the corner, nursing cold coffee, wearing long sleeves despite the heat. Lorenzo's expression hardened. "I'll have Dante check into it." Carefully, Elena signed. "She's scared." "I know." He touched Elena's hand. "You saw her first. Your choice how to handle it." The trust in those words still surprised her. Lorenzo had given her authority in this space not as his possession, but as his partner. That evening, after the cafe closed, they walked along the harbor. Elena's hand in Lorenzo's, both of them comfortable with silence. She'd testified against Matteo and his friends 3 months earlier. Written testimony, submitted through secure channels. The trial had been covered extensively. Senator Rossi's fall from grace, his son's conviction. Justice, imperfect but real. Elena had watched from a distance, her new identity protecting her. She was no longer Elena Russo. She was Elena Moretti now, Lorenzo's wife in all but law. Do you miss it? Lorenzo asked. Your old life. Before. Elena stopped walking. She pulled out her phone and typed, then showed him, I miss who I thought I'd become, but I like who I actually am. Lorenzo read it. And who are you? Elena thought about it. 6 months ago, she'd been broken. Voiceless. Afraid. Now she ran a cafe that protected the vulnerable. She was learning to speak again not just with her recovered voice, but with her actions. She'd built a life alongside a man who'd given her the one thing she'd needed most, the choice to stay. I am. She formed the words carefully. Someone who was asked. Lorenzo understood. He pulled her close, and they stood watching the sun set over Palermo's ancient harbor. In the distance, the city hummed with life, loud, chaotic, beautiful. But between them, silence spoke volumes.